Hello and welcome to the Bestseller Experiment, where we continue to discover what makes a bestseller and inspire you to start, finish and publish your book. I'm Mark DeVoe.
And I'm Mark State. And as always, a whopping great thank you to everyone who keeps this show on the road. That's our academates in the Bestseller Academy and our patrons over on Patreon. Now, if you support the podcast in the Academy or as a patron, you can get access, if you're a Chart Topper supporter, you can get access to hundreds of hours of extra content and material, including bonus material that you have on the end of shows and deep dives and all that kind of good stuff. If you go to the Academy, you get me and Mr. D as your tutors, and you join a wonderful community of people, like-minded people over there who want to write the best stories and tell their stories and just get their words out there. So if you want to support the Academy, academy.bestsellerexperiment.com. And if you want to support the podcast, bestsellerexperiment.com/support. Links in the show notes. Mr. D, how are you, sir?
I'm doing great. And just a quick reminder to everyone, if you listen to this on the 5th of September, which I believe is the day this goes out, Mark, isn't it? That is the deadline for signing up for the Academy in September. So rock on, folks. Don't pause. Just nip over to the website. I'm doing great, Mr. Stay. And I think we should introduce our fabulous guest this week.
Let's get on with it. Returning guest. So, born in Liverpool, Sarah Moorhead has told stories since childhood and uses writing as a bubblegum for her overactive brain and to keep it out of trouble. She's taught at secondary school. She's attained a black belt in kickboxing. She's worked as a chaplain. She's established a justice and peace youth group. She's amazing. She's been on the podcast before with Stuart Turton. We can talk about that, and I'll put a link in the show notes so you can check that all out. But she's here. Back, the legend. That is Sarah Moorhead. How are you, Sarah? Great to see you again. How are you?
I feel like Rocky. I'm off the canvas and I'm back in for round 2. I don't think there's many people who kind of come and did it. They don't come in for round 2, do they? Made up.
It's absolutely brilliant. It's so great to have you back on the show, Sarah. And so much has happened since we last talked. I mean, it's been a bit of a whirlwind. First of all, how are you feeling right now? Because you're in the middle of a lot of things happening. Tell us what's going on.
Well, my book comes out tomorrow, and I've got a book, like a private book launch party on Friday in this fantastic renovated old library in Liverpool. So maybe if you put that on the notes as well, that's a fantastic place to have a look at. And then next Wednesday, don't be jealous, I've actually got a launch in Waterstones in Liverpool. Yay. So I'm excited about that. That's like something that you always dream of. It's all for goals, isn't it? So I'm looking forward to that. And I'm also, my kids think I'm vaguely cool because I'm signing some books in Forbidden Planet tomorrow, which my 13-year-old is now, mum's pretty cool. But to be honest with you, it's really, really strange because you think that you'd be on top of the world, but I'm actually just very chilled at the moment.
It's the calm before the storm, isn't it? It's that kind of, you realise there's nothing you can do. The book is out there. People are already reading. Look, I've got a proof here. Now, you might think it's called An Eye for an Eye, but they've actually, that's the proof copy. It's actually called The Treatment, and I'm about halfway through it, and it's blimmin' brilliant, Sarah. It's just fantastic. It tackles some really big themes on justice and punishment, but it's also really humane and compassionate. So tell us about The Treatment, and tell us about how you manage that fine line between tackling a big theme and keeping the story entertaining, which it is, because there's a danger, something like this, these big ideas can get a bit preachy, but you don't do that. Tell us how you did it, and tell us about The Treatment.
Well, the way I kind of tread the line between preaching and trying to get it right is that if you focus on the characters and the humans involved in it, then I think, because that's a short answer, maybe we could come back to that later. So The Treatment is basically, it's 5 minutes into the future. There's a private company called Janus Justice who have taken over looking after prisoners and the prison system. And they've based it on 4 tiers. So it's a tier system where if you're committing crime because you haven't got enough food or because you haven't got anywhere to live, so you're stealing food or whatever, or you're squatting, the government provide you with the things you need to stop you offending. If you're offending because you have psychological problems, addiction, PTSD, then you go to stay in a camp, which is sort of like, it's like a sort of army barracks in the countryside, but you get everything provided for you. You stay there for as long as you need to get your therapy. It's sort of emotional, psychiatric, psychological, maybe medicine. But then as we move up the tiers to tier 3, it gets a bit more sinister. So we have aversion therapy at tier 3, where the Janice use drugs and they use hypnotherapy to make you think that what you did to other people is getting done to you. So it's very sort of, retribution theory of punishment. And then there's even a level 4 for the incurables. So that's the sort of structure of the prison system there. And it's the main character is a woman called Grace. She is a psychiatrist. She works for Janice, but she works at tier 2 where she feels like she can help people. She can give them therapy. She can talk through their problems and try and get them back on track. And then her boss, Conrad, demands that she goes into tier 3 one day because their usual psychiatrist who's in there has gone off sick. And she really struggles with the morality of that. Anyway, her best friend, Remy from childhood, he is in a bit of trouble. It looks like he's going to get sent to tier 4 and she has to try and save him. So that's the sort of basic premise of the book.
Wow. Now, your big brother was a forensic scientist and your little brother was a probation officer and a lecturer in criminal justice. Is that right?
That's right.
That must have influenced you a bit in this book, did it?
Well, certainly when we were kids, my elder brother, whose name is Damien, interestingly enough, Damien Oman, we used to call him, he had a real interest in forensics even back then. And we used to get this magazine once a week called, I think it was Murder Book Case Files, and it was like about £1.80, and it was a serial killer once a week, and we used to pore over this magazine, and my dad was a medic, so we also had kind of sort of forensic textbooks at home, so it's not your usual childhood reading matter. But what I love about books and reading is that there doesn't seem to be any age limit. There's no, you can't read this because you're not 18. So we made the most of it, and there was no ban on books in our house. And we read some very interesting things. Yes.
I was going to say, it must have been a very interesting Moorhead dinner time conversation growing up.
Honestly. I mean, at one point, when my brother was doing, he was in with the autopsies with Dr. Jim Burns, who's like the Home Office pathologist in Liverpool. He would come home at times and he would say, oh, well, we were on this scene today and this man had been dead in his kitchen for 3 days and the dog was eating his leg, and you'd be sitting there with your fish fingers going, oh, okay, right, okay, thanks for that. So,
that's a whole new level.
Dead interested. I mean, as I say, my brother was a probation officer, so I could pick his brains about some things. And then he's gone on, thankfully, that's a very, very difficult job. So he's gone on to lecture and bring in the next layer of probation officers. So I do pick his brains from time to time.
But let's come back to that thing about character that we were talking about, because there I've seen that you've been compared. This book has been compared to things like Minority Report and Philip K. Dick and stuff, which I grew up reading those books and I love them, but they were always a bit cold. They were kind of. This is very human. This is very compassionate. Tell us about Grace and her story and how she changes, because Grace is who we'd want to be, I think. She's a compassionate person. She does the right thing, but she's constantly challenged again and again, isn't she?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, Grace starred, all superheroes have a backstory. You've just got to watch Marvel. I'm a massive Marvel fan. And it's a little bit of grit in the oyster makes a pearl, doesn't it? And so Grace started off, her mother was in prison as a child, and in this dystopian world, children would be allowed to go in with their mums until they were about 6. So she spent time locked up with her mum in prison. So she understands, she's seen life from both sides. She understands what it's like to be in prison. She understands what it's like to struggle. She's fought hard to get herself, through college, through university, and become a psychiatrist. And so obviously she has that deep insight that maybe a lot of people might not have unless they'd been through that themselves.
That's fantastic. Now, when you describe the concept of the book, it has this real richness to it, and obviously it's been really thought through. But I'm curious, did this idea evolve over time? Were you sitting there kind of thinking about all these different levels, or was it one of those moments where you kind of woke up in the morning and it was like a fully formed, oh, brilliant, I've got it, and you couldn't kind of write it down fast enough?
Oh, I think we're a culmination of all our experiences, aren't we? And all our where we were nurtured and the things we've picked up along the way. So I couldn't really, I've worked for 27 years to be an overnight success sort of thing. And I think the same thing with these books. They're all part of my Lego bricks in the building of who I am. I think the whole concept from the tier system really came from Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And it was interesting because I was listening to you guys talking about this a couple of weeks ago. And it's always fascinated me, Maslow, is, you described it last time as a triangle diagram. Human beings have needs, and you can't get the next level up until you've got the first level met. So, for instance, people will need food and safety. They'll need food and water and somewhere to stay. Then they need safety. Then they need relationships. Then they need what we call self-actualization. They need to become who they are. And I was reading Colin Wilson's Plague of Murder, and he was talking about the fact that sex crime sort of came up sort of the late 19th century, became a really big thing from the late 19th century onwards. And it just occurred to me that before that, people would be committing crime because they didn't have enough food or they didn't have anywhere to live. There'd be a lot of that going on, which feels like sort of the lower levels of Maslow's hierarchy. And then the sort of the sexual crime comes in. People need relationships, and in Maslow, they need relationships. Obviously, if you kind of pervert that, people would be working on sex crimes. And if you go up further, we're looking at self-actualization. And for me, that kind of means serial killers who are trying to sort of say, I am somebody, this is who I am. I'm doing this to show you who I am. Or on the other level, it could be also, maybe terrorism, where people are becoming who they're meant to be. They are living out these ideals. So I love the way, Mr. Stay, you're such a gentle soul. And he, you talked about hierarchy, Maslow's hierarchy is sort of the different literary levels. You could say sort of the lower levels are for crime and thrillers, and the middle ones are sort of a romance, and the upper ones are literary fiction. So that's another way of interpreting it. But I love the fact that those two kind of idea that you had about the literary styles and the idea I have about crime, they kind of really fit together, don't they? And it's just a really interesting place to start from. So when I thought about that, I thought about, I am a bit idealistic. I do wish the world was a better place. And I really, really do. And I think, so much of people's struggles and so much of crime is really caused by a lack of things that you really need, and a lack of support and a lack of understanding from people in their London and the big government. They don't understand what people need, and they don't. If we gave people what they needed, you wonder to what degree we would just be left with people who did bad stuff because they wanted to do bad stuff. And that's kind of where the aversion therapy level came from.
It's uncanny timing, actually, because I started reading this, and it was the same night there was a documentary about that attack on London Bridge, which weirdly I was at HarperCollins interviewing people for the podcast, and we were shut in while it was all going on. So I thought I need to watch this, and that whole. What I hadn't realised is, the guy with the narwhal horn and everything. It was a conference about rehabilitating criminals.
Yes.
And all these questions about the difference between punishment and justice. The government wants to be seen to punish people, but you often conflate punishment with justice. Anyway, so I'm getting on a bit of it's getting like a Hyde Park corner here. But these are the things that you tackle in the novel. These things that we must be seen to be doing something, but actually, doing the good thing is the hard choice. And it does come. I think this is one of these things in story, and you can apply this to any genre. Is your character will need to make the difficult choice, and that's what you do to Grace in here. You give her the most difficult choices, and that's why it's such a compelling story.
I think also to put your main character in just horrible situations, it's just brilliant, isn't it? It's what we need to do. I think it's how the person reacts. That's their character. And we all know that from life. Life just echoes stories echo life. That the situations that you're in, depending on how you respond to that, just shows your character. So that's what we do. We put Grace in a difficult situation and then just put loads of stress on her, see what she does. And then it makes the reader think, well, what would I do in that situation? Poor Grace, what's going to happen? How's she going to deal with this? Yeah.
It's absolutely fascinating because looking at your background, Sarah, working as a chaplain, establishing a justice and peace youth group, did you kind of move into writing because you felt that it was a better way potentially for you to kind of play with these ideas, to work through them, and also to make a difference in the way people think about them. Because I'm sure when readers read your book, they'll come away with so many things to think about, and dinner time conversation topics.
Not at all. No, I wrote a book because I want to leave teaching. I want to retire early. but to be honest with you, though, I was a writer before I was a teacher. And when I went into teaching, after a few years, I thought, this is a really, really hard job. I felt very much it was a vocation. I did want to go in and change hearts and minds. I do think that's a massive part of what I am as a person. But after a few years, I thought, it's hard. How am I going to, I need an exit plan. All teachers, I don't care what they say, all teachers have an exit strategy. So they just, cope as far as they can. And then they go, right, I know what I'm going to do, and they leave. So I started thinking about writing when I was only about 27. I was only about 3 years into teaching. But what occurred to me recently was that I think teaching is part of my personality. It's in my nature, but you don't just have to teach in the classroom. You really don't. So my little Justice and Peace youth group up the road in the parish, we've got about 50 kids. We bring people in, or we talk to the kids all about the world and things that are happening and how they can help and how they can make a difference. And it occurred to me, I know it sounds stupid, but a couple of weeks ago, that the stuff I'm writing about, it's got to have that same effect on people, hasn't it? It's got to make people think about the world. I think that's what crime writing in particular does. It just puts a lens to the world and says, what are we doing here? How are we living? Could it be better? Mm.
Absolutely. Now, look, we loved your debut novel, Witness X, which I've got here. And we had you on the podcast when it first came out. What was that published experience like? Because if I recall, Sam Eads at Trapeze, she didn't go for your first idea, did she? She read something you sent her and then asked for something new. Can you tell us about that?
That was my Dragon's Den moment. So I love Sam Eads, and I always will, right? She is an absolute hero.
Oh, yeah.
So I went in and I said, look, here's my book. How do you fancy? And she says, well, I like you. Have you got anything else? I don't want this, but I like you. They're doing Dragon's Den sometimes. So I just pulled an idea and I said, well, what about this? What about if a neuroscientist could read people's minds directly from their brains and find out what happened in a crime? So she goes, right, go away and write that. So I did. And it was difficult in respects because you had somebody there was a lot of hand holding to get through. I didn't know how to structure a book. And I think that had been my biggest problem. I didn't know how to structure a book. I've got loads of ideas, my brain, I've just got a firework brain, ping, 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 ping all the time. But, it's no good. It's going to be chaos, is it? So Sam taught me how to structure a book, taught me how to edit it. It was like doing a one-on-one sort of MA in creative writing, because I don't have any qualifications in writing at all. So that was wonderful. But it came out 2 weeks before lockdown. I think Sam went off on maternity leave. Trapeze went in a different direction for the type of books they wanted to produce. So it kind of, they said, I don't think you're for us anymore. But somebody very kindly wheeled over to the office next door at Gallants and said, hey, here's Essie Moorhead. Do you fancy taking her on? But they said I wasn't sci-fi enough. And I don't really want to be sci-fi. It took that difficulty to find out that I'm a speculative crime thriller writer, and I'm happy with that.
It was a kind of a perfect storm of because my book came out just as COVID was shutting down and it's it really did have an effect, because this was very much when I remember when we'd sit in acquisition meetings and talk about books and where they'd sell, and this is very much a bookshop book. This is a book that you first of all, you see the cover, you go, oh, cool, what's that? Pick that up. And it's very word of mouth. And, so that must have been really, really tough, really, really tough that.
Yeah, it was, yeah. And it's not what you expect, you kind of, as a writer, you start at the bottom of the mountain, and every time you reach a plateau, you're like, yes, I've written a book. Yes, I've finished the book. I've got an agent. I've got a publishing deal. And every time on every plateau, you're like, come on, next thing. And then, like snakes and ladders, you find yourself all the way back down at the bottom again. So yeah, that was not easy at all, no. But like everything else in my life, that's really, when horrendous things happen, they actually always turn out to be one of the best things that ever happens. So and that's what happened here really as well. So it didn't work out. Orion dropped me. Galance didn't take me on. My agent then said she's downsizing. She's kind of narrowing her focus on the type of writers she worked with. So she dropped me, and I was just like, oh, what you do now? So just pick myself up off the canvas, brush myself down, started again. So when lockdown started, I just wrote a book in lockdown. So right, let's do it. Let's write a book. Wrote a book. No hand holding this time. Did it all myself. That gave me a lot of confidence that I actually figured out I could write a book on my own, and I knew how to do it. And it came out I was happy with how it came out. And then just started again, started looking for an agent, started looking for a publisher. So I sent it to 6 agents and got a lot of personal feedback. I got 2 people wanted to take me on out of 6. Which I thought was really good. I think 2 other people said, we like you, but we've got somebody similar to you. So I thought, well, it might be okay, because, that's not too bad, is it? It's not bad going.
And you ended up with some chancer called Ed Wilson.
Total chancer. Have you met him in real life? He's not as tall as me.
I really hope Ed's listening to this. Yeah. No, I love Ed. He's brilliant. He's absolutely fantastic. He's my agent too, listeners. And
just mention that.
No, I had to choose between 2, and that was.
How do you turn down the other agent? Because I bet they were both brilliant, were they?
Yeah, they're both brilliant. Yeah.
That's a hard thing.
At the end of the day, the decision I made was based on the fact that the other agent, I actually have a pair of socks older than him. So I decided that I would go for experience and age.
It does come down to that, though, doesn't it? It does come down to things like that. So tell us the story of what happened.
I'm not saying young people can't do just as good a job. I'm sure he could. I'm not ageist in that respect, but I thought I'd go old school.
So what happened next, Sarah, when you signed up with Ed? Tell us the story of how the book then found a publisher.
I just said to Ed, look, Ed, I don't, we'll have a little sort of round of edits, but I can't serve 2 masters. I need to have an editor and work with them because I'd found it really stressful working with my original agent, editing, and then with Sam editing. I found that very, very stressful, actually. And, recently there's been a lot of talk about how things are for debut authors and how difficult it can be, and how we don't really know the ropes, and we don't know how things work. And it can be very difficult when you're working blind, really. So Ed sent it off to a number of people, and Kit Neville at Canello, who again I actually do genuinely have a pair of socks older than him. They're a really good pair of socks, but I bring them out every Halloween. They're thigh length, black and white stripy ones. You wear them with the ruby red slippers, to do the Wizard of Oz witch. So they are, they only wear them once a year. But so Kit's young, but he's just brilliant. He's so different to me. He's like young, he's Oxford educated, he's well spoken, he's just very quiet and gentle. He's just lovely. So we kind of met, and I just thought, I really like this guy. This is going to work for me. So that's what happened.
Fantastic. And you've had some amazing things happen in the run up to this release, haven't you? I mean, the bookseller being one.
I've been in there twice.
Right.
Twice. Once for Northern Powerhouse, like the Northerners got a shout, and one for crime thrillers, and because the cover is so fantastic. Branding, see my necklace, I had my necklace made. There's a guy called Andrew Davis Designs, and he is just an absolute genius. And the cover of the book, there we go. Do you notice I've got a little bit of foil there? Can you see the gold flash?
Oh,
makes it look like it look like the lines beep beep beep. Yep. So Andrew designed that, and if you read the book, and especially particularly the aversion therapy bit, it's really evocative of what the book's about, So I think it's great, and it's got the eye for sort of the Clockwork Orange vibe as well, which Imran Mahmood said it's Clockwork Orange for the new cohort. I was like, yes. And Christina Dolce, she went, oh my gosh, absolute hero. There's so many people who've been so kind. Brian McGilloway and Eve Smith, just loads of people who I love. And obviously Stu.
I was going to say, and someone called Stuart Turton.
Someone called Stu, yeah.
So before we go to listener questions, what's coming next? Because I think this is a 2-book deal. Is that right? What have you got? What have you got lined up?
Well, all I can say is it's a mashup between Frankenstein and the Wizard of Oz.
Oh, sold.
It's about 4 people looking for something that's going to help them, and a doctor who thinks he might be able to give them what they need.
And have you had to start working on that, Sarah, or are you kind of like just pushing through now with the publicity and the promo of the current book?
I'm a consummate professional, Mr. D. I'm a consummate professional. So I've been doing both at the same time, but only because I'm on summer holidays. Next week, when we go back to school, it'll be back to 5 a.m. get-ups and grafting. You know, it'll be hard work next week, but I'm
going to bring you up on that. Consummate professional. I read earlier today on Twitter, I'm in bed with a bag of Revels and a brew. Reading M.W. Craven, which is fine. Tell us, is that your life now? Is staying in bed, eating Revels and reading books? Is that your daily routine?
So I have to tell you that I don't actually have a sweet tooth. So that was unusual for me to have a bag of chocolate in bed. I don't really have a sweet tooth, no. So I'd sell chocolates for, I'd have that over for specifically Aldi's cheese and onion crisps. So that's my thing. So no, what I do is at the moment during the summer holidays, I like to stay in bed till about 8:30, and I'll read with black coffee, and I'll have a read in the morning. We all play Wordle, which I'm fuming about this morning because frequently I put in a specific word.
Yeah, we all do
just
that.
To get, and it was, and I didn't do it today, and it was the word.
You missed it
because my husband.
That's
my husband
like
said,
the ultimate.
You're cheating, isn't it? Isn't it?
It's like
Getting
it's the same thing as.
Wordle.
Do you know what? Do you know what that is, Sarah? Because I've experienced this as well. It's like the equivalent of having lottery numbers, and the week that your lottery number comes up, you forget to buy a ticket. That's how addictive
Honestly,
Wordle is. It's like heroin for lexicons. It's ridiculous. It should be banned.
So human.
It should be banned. No. But I just want to say, for anyone listening to this outside the UK, I have to mention this. You know that we've had this hobnob thing going on the podcast for quite a while. I've got to say, when I came back to the UK this year, the test for me is I stop at a service station from Heathrow Airport in the rental car, and I go into the garage, as we like to call it, not the petrol station, and I look at the English chocolates. And the first one I picked out this year, it's always a test. Guess what it was? Bag of Revels.
Bag of Revels.
For anyone who's not experienced the magic of Revels outside the UK, how would you describe them, Sarah? It's kind of like a
Russian roulette.
It's
Russian roulette for chocolate. That's what it is.
Yeah.
It's a Russian roulette
like a lucky
chocolate.
dip.
You don't quite know what you're going to get. And when I get the coffee one, I don't like. Everyone has their favourites, but the coffee one is the one that I like. Shouldn't have taken that.
You like the coffee?
No, I can't stand the coffee. Like all the other ones.
What's your favourite one?
Probably the minstrel equivalent, which is just solid chocolate, obviously, because it's more bang for your buck, right?
Yeah, I like the little disc one. The little disc one.
Yeah, that's the one.
That isn't quite a minstrel. There's also the kind of the Malteser knockoff as well, which I quite like.
How about you, Sarah? What's your favourite?
The toffee, the little toffee one.
Okay,
good call. Actually, that is good. Yeah,
yeah.
So
I really want a packet of Revels now.
we did say to the Hobnobs that they could sponsor the show, but they never replied to our calls. So Revels, if you're interested,
can I just have a complaint? I need to complain because I was in just by chance. I was in a Poundland yesterday. They have a Chris the Caterpillar. Have you seen this, Chris the Caterpillar?
Chris.
I took a photograph of it. Mark Stay, I took a photograph to send you. I was outraged. Chris the Caterpillar.
It's going to be loads of litigious action going on. Someone's going to have to write. There's going to be a Netflix documentary about this. Right?
About the
knockoffs of the caterpillars.
That's not a bad idea, actually.
Actually, we'll take that out of the podcast. Me and Mr. Stay will make it. Me and Mr. Stay will make it. Oh my God, we knew this would happen bringing you on, Sarah. Honestly, it's brilliant. But cheese and onion and Revels, that's a combo. Oh my gosh. Like, were you having those at the same time?
Together.
Okay.
No. What I'm saying is
not a
that
monster.
because I don't have no, I'm not a psychopath. Jeez. So because I wouldn't, I would give up all chocolate if it meant I could, I could just eat crisps. If it was one or the other, I wouldn't bother with chocolate. I'd just have cheese and onion Aldi crisps.
We don't have cheese and onion over in Canada or America. It's like and people, when they hear it, yes. And when people hear, they say cheese and onion, and the other one's prawn cocktail. Like they
and they eat peanut butter and jam sandwiches, but they can't accept cheese and onion, for God's sake. Come on, people.
Oh, brilliant. You haven't lived until you visited England, stopped at a service station, got yourself a cheese and onion bag of crisps and a bag of Revels. And then you can go home, basically. It's good visit. But
a can of Coke, or a Scouser can of Coke. A can of Coke goes really well with that. Can of Coke. Oh, talking of Liverpool. I heard Mark DeVoe say a couple of weeks ago that I was one of his favourite 12 Scousers, which I think sounds... But what I was thinking was then, how many people play on a football team? So would I be on your bench, would I, Mark?
No. You see, that's the thing. I, obviously, being a lifelong Liverpool fan, I have many favourite Scousers. The fact you even got in the top 12, Sarah, means I had to knock someone off the team. I had to transfer him to Saudi Arabia, to get you in. Absolutely brilliant.
You'll be jealous though, because I saw there's a cafe at the bottom of our road, and I saw Stevie G there not long ago, and I just, being cool, just walked past, went, I stay, walked out, quite cool.
You do?
Didn't ask him.
Even I've heard of him.
Yeah. Love it.
That's probably the last time you see him in Liverpool, unfortunately. Bless him. Oh, gutted. Anyway, moving on. What I would like, we've got some great listener questions, Sarah, which we'd like to ask you, but we always do this extended podcast, and we would like to ask those in the extended. So if you're interested in joining us for a cheeky extended with Sarah, it's going to be raucous. Like if this were a preview of what we do publicly, right, Mr. Stay? If this were a little preview of what we do publicly, you're going to love the extended. But we're going to delve a bit more in talking about resilience, not giving up, because this is a really important theme. And I know your story is so inspiring, Sarah, that you bounce back from those lows, those crashes, and you've come back to massive victories. And we're also going to talk a little bit about how you figure your trail of clues out as well. So if you'd like to join us for the extended, pop along to Patreon, sign up, or join the Academy, and you will get access to the extended version. So, folks, welcome to the extended edition with our very special... This is the first time, Sarah, we've done an extended... Oh, no, we did one with Linwood Barkley. You're together with Linwood,
Someone
Sarah.
called Linwood Barkley.
Someone called Linwood Barkley. But we always find the extendeds we go a little bit deeper, and because they're not kind of put out publicly, we can be a little bit more, raucous, as I mentioned, which is cool,
litigious,
fun. All that good stuff. Absolutely. But we're absolutely delighted to have you on the show again, and we're gonna dig a bit deeper. We've got some brilliant listener questions, starting with the wonderful Julian Barr, who's also part of the BXP team, which you've been a part of for many years now, Sarah, as well. And Julian wants to know about resilience. He said, can you tell us about resilience and not giving up?
I've thought about this because resilience is really, it's something in particular in schools as well, that what we figure out, the way that kids succeed, the kids who succeed are the ones who have resilience, more than motivation, more than supportive parents, or anything. It's resilience. And for some reason, I don't know why, I think it's in my blood. And I've got a home video of me when I was 2.5 in the garden. One of my wellies has come off and it has fallen over on its side. And I am, the video shows me really grainy because I'm very, very old, and I'm older than you two, believe it or not. Walking around the welly, trying to pick the welly up with my toe, walking around it, trying to put it on, it falls over again, picking it up, falls over again. And then the foot goes in and I just run off. And my mum said to me, that's just you all over that. You just go until you get what you want and then you run off. And I think the only way I can explain it is I have this thing in my head which says, what's the alternative? So, when you have a very, very serious relationship breakdown, like I did a while ago, what's the alternative? Do I just stay on my own forever, or do I get up and get on with it? And it was the same thing with, trying to find a good job, or trying to get a book published, or getting dropped by my agent and my publisher. You just say, what's the alternative? Do I say, that's it, dreams are over, get on with just having a boring everyday job and forget about these things, or do I get up, get on with it, and just try again? Because once or twice, if you keep going, you've got to succeed somehow. And if you ask any writer, the key to success is just doing it and keep on going until you get there.
That rings so true, because I had a real slump earlier, just after the film came out, because the film, basically Warner's, dumped it out there with no marketing or publicity, and it died. And, I'd been expecting this to be a big kind of peak in my life and getting meetings and more work and blah, blah, blah. And it didn't happen. And I was in a real slump. And I was talking to another author about this, who her book had come out from a major publisher. And this is an author that's been a Sunday Times bestseller, and and it sold 35 copies in the first week because they'd done nothing with it.
Yeah.
And we sat down and we were like, this is really bad. We're feeling very depressed. We're feeling very down. The dream has gone sour, kind of thing. But we kind of came to the same conclusion, which is, we didn't say what's the alternative. Basically, we both said we don't know how to do anything else. We've had jobs. I've worked in publishing, I've worked in sales, I've done this and I've done that. There are things I can go back to, although being over 50 now, it's very difficult to go back to those sort of things because, that ageism is kind of real. But also, I'm here now. This is what I do. This is all I know how to do, basically. And yes, what is the alternative? Because you can walk away from it, but for me, it's going to always draw me back. So, 100%. And
I think, particularly with writing, it's all about the madness of writing. It just makes you can't get away from it. You can't stop doing it. It's the way your brain works. It's the way you express yourself. So, no, we couldn't stop doing it. So you can't just give that up. It's like having a breakup of a relationship. You're not going to change from being somebody who's in a relationship and who wants to be in a relationship to somebody who's just going to be on their own, because that's not who you are. You know what you want. So you have to kind of go and take it with both hands, don't you?
Which is, I totally agree with, but one of the problems I've had is explaining how all this madness works to like friends and family, particularly family, because no one in my family has ever done this, actually, apart from my aunt. But she, would talk to mum and dad about this, and friends and family. They think once you publish, you're made, it's the gravy train, and you're rich, and you're this and yeah. So how did you?
But didn't you? Because I did. I thought that's what was going to happen, and then when it didn't, my Lord, I was shocked.
I mean, I didn't, because I'd worked in publishing and I'd seen careers come and go, wax and wane. I kind of knew the realities of it. And I knew that because of lockdown, and because I knew my publisher wasn't spending tons of money, and because I knew the film company wasn't spending tons of money, I could temper my expectations. But even so, explaining to others. So how that in many ways is the most difficult part of the resilience. It's all, we can bring ourselves up, but having to explain it to others, was that a bit of a challenge for you as well?
Well, yeah, I do think people thought, things were going to be a lot rosy. I think they think you're going to earn a couple of bob, and people still say to me, "Oh, have you not left teaching yet?" Thinking that I'll be able to sort of retire and travel around the world and stuff. So I just keep on hoping, really. I think as you know, I teach religion, and I'm a person of faith, and the psychologists say that religion and faith are never going to die out, even though people think we're gone into this scientific age, and then we're not going to, religion's not going to play any importance anymore. They say that the thing about religion that it'll give you, that nothing else will give you, is hope when there is no hope. And I think that's a wonderful thing. It's kind of really good for evolution. Evolutionarily speaking, if you have hope when there's no hope, you're going to survive. So I think that sums up kind of where I'm at, is there's hope when sometimes you feel like there's no hope. And I don't know where that comes from. And I don't know why I am so stubbornly convinced that it's all going to work out one day, but I'm convinced it's going to work out one day.
and that's one of the most important things, Sarah, because, we were just talking about this yesterday, Mark Stay and I, about this idea you have to believe it first before it can come real. And it's so true. You have to first believe it. Because the thing is, if you choose to believe it, you're already ahead of the marathon race, because all the people that don't believe it, well, they're going to be left at the back of the pack anyway and drop off eventually. So I absolutely admire the focus you've got, the hope, the resilience that you have. And you talked about, you eventually succeed if you keep going, which you absolutely do. But I think success is even the point of bouncing, that moment of bounce back, from the low points. Success that somebody actually chooses to say, I'm going to keep going with this, or I'm going to take everything I've learned and go to the next level now because of what you've learned. That in itself is a success. So I want to honor you in that, because I think it's very, very inspiring.
Thank you. And what's the saying? What's an obstacle? It's what you see when you take your eye off the goal. I think it's this idea that you've got to just, I don't have the education. I don't live in that there London. I'm not like particularly bright or well spoken or whatever. I just am what I am. But see that goal, that's where my sights are set.
I think you are. I've read your books. I think you are very bright. Let's. Did the experience of Witness X, did that change the way you wrote the treatment? Did it change your approach to it? Did you think, I've got to be more commercial, or I've got to be more this, or tell me about that experience and how it might have.
So I think originally I went into crime writing because I thought, partly because I think it's if you're going to sell books, I wouldn't write a literary book because I wouldn't know how to start. But I'm not sure it would sell, because I do want to make money. My husband's an academic, and he always says, it's all about the work. It's all about the work, what you're doing in the work. And I'm like, no, it's all about making some money, having some fun. Yeah. So, there was that in mind. But what I found, so I did want to sell books, but I'm starting to think, and I might be wrong, but I'm starting to think you could only write the book that you can write. So I did grow up in the 80s. My brother, my dad was a medic. We grew up in an Irish Catholic household. That science and religion were very much happy bedfellows. The sort of experience of the 80s films I watched, the books I've read, RoboCop and the Terminator and Blade Runner, all these things I'm a complete recipe for the book that I was going to write. So it wasn't really that I could pick what book I was going to write. It was like, well, what emanates from you as a person? Who are you and what comes out of you? And that was it. So it's not as though I kind of went, I'm going to write this book that everybody's going to love. I'm going to go, do you know what? This is me. This is how I view the world. And that's my feelings about it. And I think that's why those things came out, really. Does that make sense?
Total sense.
Brilliant stuff. Brilliant. Now we have another question, Sarah, from a wonderful Academy member called Andrea Van Bruggen. And she wants to know, how do you go about figuring out your trail of clues? Do you know many of them in advance, or go back and add them after the first draft?
Because there's a real mystery in the treatment, isn't there? There's conspiracies and all sorts going on, aren't there?
Well, big piece of advice for writers when they're starting out, because every time I start writing a book, I go, I haven't got a clue what I'm doing here. I don't know how to write a book anymore. Right, and I've done it 3 times already. One of them didn't sell, but so I just do the vomit draft. We famously talk about the vomit draft. Just throw it all down. I'm like a sort of you're like a potter's wheel. You get a big load of muck, you throw it down, and then you spend time listening to Ghost, watching the film Ghost and singing, oh my darling, twisting it on the potter's wheel, trying to get it right. So I'm a big believer that you are kind of subconsciously competent, that your neurons and your synapses are doing all sorts of things when you're just sitting there going, what am I doing? So as you get all that muck down, all your fireworks are going off in your brain, all these ideas are going off, you're making these connections. So when you go back and try and refine it, they'll come out. And then you do have to go back and weave some things in. It's a bit like Back to the Future, where you change this on one chapter 24, you have to go all the way back and redo it all the way through. But you can't get it perfect the first time. So don't try to get it perfect the first time, because you're just going to put yourself in knots and stress yourself out. Just slap it down and it'll work out. It'll all come into being to what it's meant to be.
You talked about your time with Sam Eads as a kind of author boot camp. What were sort of the biggest lessons that you learned from Sam while working on Witness X?
Structure. How to structure a story. So I went off and I read Story Genius by Lisa Cron, The Science of Storytelling by Will Storr, Into the Woods, Save the Cat, Stealing Hollywood. I went and I read and I learned how to structure a book, because one of my original pals from the writers group, I'm in a new writers group now called Write Club, which I like. Write Club. What happens in Write Club stays in Write Club. But the book club the writing group I used to be in, one of the older fellas said, "Oh, that's just writing by numbers. If you use things like Save the Cat and whatever, it's writing by numbers." And I said, "Look, all of us have a skeleton. They might look very slightly different, but they're generally the same. All stories have a skeleton." I said, and you need that structure in place, and then you can mess around with the plot and the storyline, and you can add the clothes and the muscles and the skin and the makeup and the hairdo later. So, but story works in a specific way, and our brains are wired for story, and we understand the world via story. Our memories are stories, and gossip and hopes and dreams. That it's all stories. So we have to try and I had to try to understand what a structure of a story looked like, and then once I got that, that really helped. Everything else wasn't as painful then.
I think though there is to sort of play devil's advocate with that guy. I mean, a lot of new writers will look at the hero's journey and just write a story that hits all those beats, but you end up with a protagonist being dragged along by the story. And what's clear about your books and what you were saying earlier about character and the story of change and the vomit draft idea is that, yes, just get it down, but for the second draft and the third draft and drafts after that, finessing it, those structure things are great tools. They're great for knocking it into shape. But because the thing I've always had with the hero's journey, well, not always had, but it's kind of it's since doing this podcast actually, is that a lot of those hero's journey analyses are done after the fact when someone's finished it, and they're looking back and they're looking for patterns. Whereas, when I'm editing and I'm lost in the woods and I haven't got a clue that's when those things come in really, really handy, actually.
Yes. Yeah.
I also think as well, the amalgamation approach, Sarah, as you mentioned about reading lots of different models, and then you kind of uniquely draw from what works from all of them, and that's what you create. And it's a bit like I think, if an architect doesn't have architectural plans, the house will not stand up. It's a similar idea to the skeleton. So, but I also think as well, for people coming, for people who are kind of have tried to write a story without any of these supports and then discover it, it can mean there's a lot less decision making that you have to do in terms of the building of the story, and you can just get on with enjoying developing the character and all the important stuff, the way the character thinks. That's different from the skeleton, isn't it? And the way they move, for example.
Exactly, yeah. So once your structure's in place, then I feel like you are more free, because you're not going to have to go back and rewrite it a million times like I did with earlier books, because I didn't know how the story worked. So you do have to have an understanding of story, and then you also have to have a lot of trust in yourself that your brain will do a lot of that for you without you knowing it. Yeah, because that's true as well. It's like when you learn to drive, there's all sorts of things going on in your brain and your body, and everything's just ticking over naturally. And with story, because that's how our brains are wired, then a lot of it will happen subconsciously, and you just got to trust the process that as you're working through it, it'll come out.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. It's something you have to understand. It's a fundamental, story structure. But it's I now try, when I'm doing a first draft, I try not to think about it at all. And then and as you say, it sort of comes instinctively now. When these things come along, so you're not worried about being, your character being led by the nose by the structure. But yeah, it's. But then, I mean, it's. I'm working on a thing now with a collaborate with another writer, and we're outlining again, which, I said I'd never do again, but I'm doing it. So we are out, and we're actually thinking sequences, 5 sequences, and honing that down. And it's been really weird going back to it again, but it's kind of working really well. So,
Well, especially if you're working with somebody else.
Yeah.
If you're working with, 2 people, that might be better, mightn't it? Yeah.
So Sarah, if someone was listening to this and they were saying your position, going back, thinking, they might have had a bit of bad luck happen, COVID, things like that, and they're kind of on the verge of thinking, oh, I can't go through this again, I don't want to do this. What words of advice would you have for them?
Do you really want it? Is that where you're going to give up? Because do you want this or not? It's like having a baby. Do you know, you guys kind of have some experience of that, but straight after you're having a baby, you're just so knackered, and it's like, blooming hell, what was that? And then you come to a point where you go, no, actually, I think we'll do that again. I mean, oh my God, why do people do it a second time after the first time? It's so crazy, because it's what you want, and you're willing to go through that. You're willing to go through that and the difficulty that it brings, because that's what you want. So if anybody gives up, I'd have to say to them, is that what do you really want this? Because you're giving up at this point. Is that too harsh?
Not at all. No. I heard a Jim Gaffigan skit yesterday called 4 Kids, and he said to the audience, he said, so I've just had a new baby, and everyone went, "Hooray!" And he said, yeah, 4th kid, complete silence. He said, it's weird, I never get applaud for that. He says, by that stage, the audience just thinking, are you Amish now?
But funnily enough, they said that a lot of authors, they say a lot of people want to write a book, and out of the 100 people who say they want to write a book, 2 people might. And then out of those, imagine 100 people who write a book, 2 people might finish it. And then out of 100 people who finish the book, 2 people might get an agent. And then out of all those people who get an agent, a small amount might get a publishing deal. And then a lot of authors give up after 3 books, apparently. So I'm absolutely determined to get to the 3rd and the 4th, just to prove a point, just to say I can do it. So, let's try. Let's try.
No, I know you will.
Plus, I need a new washing machine, because my washing machine's gone, and witness X, I bought a fridge freezer, absolutely made up, a gorgeous handbag, and we went on holiday to Alicante. So, this time round, I want a washing machine. I'll probably go for a pair of boots this time, and I think we want to go to Turkey next year. So you see, there's always this monetary thing going on. Really, let's not be too airy fairy. I don't want it just because I don't want to be this kind of, oh, look at me, I'm an author. I want to be, hey, put something in my bank and I can go and have some fun.
Do you know what we do in the academy, Sarah, which is really fun, is we people create their dream declarations, so what they want to do with their book, but we also say, how are you going to celebrate? And we have had the most amazing. Some people like going off on holiday. There's a lot of whiskey for some reason, very old whiskey. But I think it's really important to attach something that you'd really like to celebrate and do, to celebrate the success of something that does happen when it happens. Because too many times in life, we something big happens and we get a buzz from it. And then we're back to our day job, so to speak. We're back to kind of like, right, what's the next book or the next bit of promotion I'm going to do? Instead of really stopping and enjoying it. So the fact that you're kind of attaching, the success of your book, and you're getting experiences out off the back end of it, I think it's absolutely brilliant. So yeah. I think everyone should do it.
Isn't there a bottle of whiskey called Writer's Tears?
There is. Yeah, that's come up a few times. Yeah.
Well said. But also, like you say, Mark, if you have a set of goals in mind and you take one of them at a time, so getting an agent, getting a deal, doing this, doing that, writing about this. And then you've also got this sense of what very specifically, what do you want out of this? Do you want to be a bestseller? Do you want to make some money? Do you want all your mates to go, ooh, you're an author? What do you want out of it? I think if you do that, you're more likely to manifest, as they say. You're more likely to work towards what you want, aren't you?
Well, it also gets you through those difficult days where you're there, hitting the email, ringing up agents, trying to make something happen. If you've got something attached to it, saying, I'm going to keep working towards that holiday in Turkey or whatever it might be, and it gets you through.
Escaping from teaching, every day I'm reminded why I'm doing it.
Right.
Don't get me wrong, I love teaching's great in lots of ways, because the kid's dead interesting, he's never bored, but it is graft. It's absolute graft. And I'm getting a yeah.
It's, in a way, it makes writing probably feel like a slightly easier option, does it?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That's what every writer should be, a
Yes.
teacher first then.
But the other thing as well, if you've had a taste, because I had this with Robot Overlords. I had Robot Overlords come out, and you've had a taste of it. You've had I took 6 months off. This was 10 years ago now, and for 6 months, I was the writer about town, and I had a taste of the life. And you think, I can't go back to that. Well, I did go back. I mean, I obviously did go back to work, and it was. But there's another thing out there that you think, I've got to do everything I can to get back to Xanadu or wherever it is. It's
Yeah, and also writing and being a writer, being an author specifically, it feels like such a sort of a nebulous thing to be in lots of ways, doesn't it? And when you can actually do that, and you can, say to the kids you teach, this is what I do, even though it's only at the moment part-time, that's quite inspirational. That's kind of exciting for them. And I'm having a party on Friday night. I'm having my book launch for my friends and family, and there's 2 kids who are coming to, well, they're kids, like they're in their late 30s, let's say. They're coming, and they were kids I taught, and we had a little writers group called the Inklings, about 15, 20 years ago, whatever. And they, I have kids who I tried to help them on their writing journey, who've got books out and stuff, and they're coming now to my book launch, and it's just really nice,
Brilliant.
It's nice.
It's like Stuart all over again. If you missed the previous podcast, you should definitely listen to that. But I think you're absolutely right. I think there is this sense of when a teacher is actually living it, it's so much more powerful in terms of inspiring people who are looking at you. There's a lot of people out there who teach but have never actually done what they're teaching. And I think, to be actually out there doing it and showing people that you can do it, the fact that you can write books and teach at the same time. I mean, a lot of people would just have the excuse, well, I don't have the time to be able to write a book. I'm too busy with all these other things, and all the other things that you do in your life, Sarah. I mean, from the youth group and everything else, it's absolutely phenomenal. So you are a massive inspiration. And you know what? When we talk about the success and the things that can come out of the great things that can come out of getting success with writing, but for me, it still always boils down to this number one foundational thing, which is if you can inspire even one person through writing your book, then you've been a successful writer, regardless of everything. If one person's life is changed in whatever way, whether they choose to write a book, whether they read something that you've written and makes them think about the prison system, the justice system, whatever. And those are the bits that we can't measure. It's easy to look at our book sales and go, oh, look at this, or oh no, look at that, or look at our reviews, look at our stars. But we can't, if you could attach a value to each person's life that was changed, everyone would be millionaires. Literally everyone would be millionaires, because we don't know about all the people that haven't come to you and said, you changed my life, or, this part of your book made me think about the world differently. And that's, I think, why we all show up and keep on doing this and keep writing. And that we take
It's about sowing seeds, isn't it? It's like sowing seeds. I think you do that very much when you're teaching as well, that, we're kind of forming young minds. And then later on in life, like Stu, you see this flower of a seed that you helped to plant years and years ago. And the other thing is that I can't fight the government. I'm not very political. Who's going to listen to me? If I write a letter, dear HMP Liverpool, I think with your prisoners you ought to blah, blah, blah. They're not going to listen to me. But if I write a book which, highlights some questions, if I just get people to ask themselves questions, who knows where that might lead? And talking of which, HMP Liverpool Book Club are reading my book right now, so God only knows what they'll make of it. It might be interesting.
Are you going to go in and give a talk?
I would like to, yeah. I think they're gonna invite me in, and I'll have a chat and see what the lads make of it. But
I went and gave a talk in a high security, maximum security prison once. One of the most incredible experiences I've ever had.
They let you out again?
Yeah, they did actually. They did, surprisingly.
I remember, so I'm in class. I'm in class with 150 adolescents a day, so I kind of know how that feels. Brilliant, Sarah. Well, thank you so much for all of that incredible wisdom, and we're going to dive back into the main show now. And thank you so much for all the extendeds, and
and thanks to everyone listening to this as well. We always want to say a big thank you. If you really enjoyed this interview and this extra bonus that we give you, please tell your friends and spread the word about the extended. So, what are your writing dreams? Finishing that book, quitting the day job, becoming a best-selling author? Well, over 4 years, we've studied the advice of over 300 best-selling authors who've collectively sold over 500 million books. And we are excited to announce the Bestseller Academy. If you're ready to take your writing to the next level with accountability, craft, and coaching, your bestseller dreams are now only a click away. To find out more and apply, visit bestsellerexperiment.com/academy. That's bestsellerexperiment.com/academy. So, Sarah, we would like you to stay with us, particularly for the wins and the celebrations this week. Because, Mark, how many times have we mentioned the name of Sarah Moorhead in this section of the podcast over the years?
Yeah, no, absolute winner. So it's great to have you here. So we've got a couple here. Over on the Academy, we've got Karen Story, who has got an email letting her know that her memoir piece has just got onto the shortlist in another competition. This same piece is now shortlisted in 2 separate competitions awaiting results in September. The first competition is a very big one, but I'm not allowed to say yet which one it is. Luckily, both competitions are happy with simultaneous submissions and even simultaneous shortlistings, as long as the piece hasn't been previously published. Fingers crossed for September. Karen is on fire at the moment.
On fire.
She's just, she's had to do a spreadsheet to keep up with all the competition interest she's been doing.
We were joking on Monday in the life coaching session in the Academy about she's going to have to bring up the Guinness Book of Records, because I think she might be getting close to some kind of world record for the amount of short story nominations and wins. This is a phenomenon in the making. Absolutely brilliant.
And you've got to be in it to win it. And what we love is that you're putting yourself out there, and that takes guts. And I think that's wonderful.
It is. I had a one-to-one with someone in the Academy today, and one of their big fears was putting stuff out there. They were saying, I have, what if someone finds the book lacking? What if they don't like it? What if it doesn't work? And I said, there are 8 billion people on the planet. Only a tiny percentage of them are actually going to like it. The book, there is always someone out there who won't like it. You're never going to please everyone.
That cat from Germany who gave me 2 stars the other day. Oh my goodness. Don't look at Goodreads ever. That's my huge advice. Don't look at Goodreads.
But what you will get is and I'm sure you've had this, Sarah, where people will go to you, this book has moved me. This book has made me laugh. It's made me cry. It's touched me in a way. It's my favorite book. I hadn't expected this. You will get these comments. I got an email from someone who I know is in end of life care, and they're reading my book and they are loving it. So this is someone who can see the finish line, if you like, and they're taking the time to read my book. And that has just completely blown my mind. So yeah, putting yourself out there kind of comes with the territory, and it is tough, and it can really knock you back. But every now and then you get a little message.
Psychologists say that we tend to focus on the negative because we want to sort of protect ourselves. And what you've got to try and do is really focus on the positive ones. And I know it's hard, but just try and put the negative ones out of your minds. But isn't that wonderful that your book's bringing someone comfort when they're in that situation? That's beautiful.
That's amazing.
Nice. Completely blown me away.
And Mark, you mentioned about 8 billion people on the planet. I don't know if my maths is right here, but I think I just worked out that to get 1 million selling book, you only have to reach, ready for this, 0.0125% of the world's population. That's like
it's doable.
Hundredth of 1% or something. I think I've got that wrong. I think it's actually, if I know a listener out there will correct, we've got a professor of maths somewhere, let us know what 1 million of 8 billion is, but it's a tiny percentage when you look at it like that. It's cool.
That just makes me feel like an even bigger failure.
No, it just shows you how
the negative.
No, it just shows you how little you've got.
Focus on the positive.
Brilliant.
Positive. Let's get back to the positive. Over on Facebook, Rebecca Powell, family away for 10 days. So I set a target of 2,000 words a day for 10 days to kickstart my new novel. 9 days in and 20,000 words banked. Never written so much so fast.
Wow.
Word count will now plummet, obviously, but hopefully 200 words a day will now seem like a breeze. 200 words a day.
200 words a day. It is, isn't
Works.
it? Absolutely brilliant. I think that's what people should do. They should try and write 2,000 words a day and then realize how easy 200 words a day is. The fact you did it, that's absolutely brilliant, Rebecca. Well done.
And last but by no means least, Susie Edge. Again, like Sarah, barely a week goes by where we don't update with something amazing that's happened with Susie. So not only has Susie announced a massive book deal. So Hachette Children's Book has got 3 books from Susie. So they've acquired 3 non-fiction titles by Susie Edge. So there's the text-led titles, History Stinks, Poo Through the Ages, and History Stinks, We Through the Ages. And then there's a full-colour title called A Hole in the Head, A Gruesomely Grisly History of Medical Firsts, which is coming out in 2025. So Susie's got 3 amazing books coming out, children's books. But you remember, Mr. D, Susie was nominated for TikTok Author of the Year, which she didn't win. But she says, on my flight home, one of the flight crew came along and asked me if I was me, and got very excited about my books and got me up for a photo in front of everyone on the plane. It was very surreal, but quite a moment, a winning feeling. I have a book to edit this week, Back to Reality. I said to her, don't edit Back to Reality. We've already done it. But that...
Who would not want to read about pee and poo through the ages? Everybody.
Seriously, Horrible Histories missed one there big time, because this is probably going to be bigger than Horrible Histories. And I talk about, like, if anyone has young children, that is going to be the bedtime reading for the next couple of years.
It's a no-brainer. It's a total no-brainer. I'm totally buying that. Yeah.
Can we also mention Steve Gowland on the Wins of the Week, because he's doing my book launch interview on Friday. So there should be some cheeky photographs of me and Steve. I think he's from Southport, so he's a bit posher than me. And then Tommy Dunn's coming as well. He's a proper Scouser, I think. With a name like Tommy Dunn, he'll be a Scouser. So I'll get a photograph of the 3 of us up on the BXP.
Brilliant.
Fantastic. Well, look, folks, this is what the BXP group is like. It's all about supporting each other. It's all about celebrating wins. It's all about helping each other out. And you're going to be there with people like Susie and Sarah and some absolute legends as well. So, become a chart topper supporter and get involved.
Totally grow and expanding a number of legends, it seems, at the moment. Absolutely brilliant. Absolutely brilliant stuff. And Mr. Stay, let's remind people how they can find out about us on socials.
Yeah, on social media. Well, it's expanding now because they've finally done a desktop thing for Threads. So we're a little bit more lively on Threads now. But yeah, if you want to find us on Facebook, we're Bestseller Experiment. That seems to be where the action really is at the moment, actually. On Twitter, we're at Bestseller XP, same on Instagram and on Threads as well. So come and find us there. If you want to drop us a line, go to bestsellerexperiment.com. There's a contact tab there. You can email us there. And celebrate your wins. Tell us what's going on in the world. Ask us questions. Suggest guests for the future, all that fun stuff.
Brilliant. And also, we just want to say a big thank you to everyone who supports this podcast. If you'd like to do the free 200-word challenge, it's 200wordchallenge.com. And if you really want to really level up Academy, the Bestseller Academy, you will get a membership to the BXP team, which is where you'll meet and be able to chat with people like Sarah. How long have you been a member now, Sarah, of the BXP team?
72 years.
72 years at least, isn't it? Yeah. So yeah, you get to chat and find out all the incredible things that are happening in everyone's world, and there's such a wealth of knowledge in there, Sarah, isn't there? Just in terms of the support.
Yeah, we're all just normal people. I mean, just look at me. I'm just a normal person. If I can do it, you can do it. And then just come along and we'll just keep you going. We'll keep you going when you're flagging.
Brilliant stuff. And thank you so much, Sarah. Now, Sarah, how can people find out about your book and your website?
So my website, which I've been tinkering with, is www.sarahmoorhead.com. So get on there and sign up for my newsletter and just generally keep in touch. I'm also on Twitter and Instagram, Sarah Moorhead, author. So you can find me on the website. That's probably the easiest place. I'm just about to put up my author scrapbook, which is all sorts of really interesting things like Roald Dahl's Christmas card from Roald Dahl. I've got a letter from Jilly Cooper. I've got Terry Pratchett's autograph. I've got quite a few things. So I'm going to get that up on my website this week, and you'll be able to see how 27 years of trying to fight to be an author came out in all sorts of little relics and mementos.
That sounds amazing. Hold the phone. How did you get a letter from Jilly Cooper? Tell us about that.
I wrote to her and said, "Hey, Jilly, how did you become an author?" And she wrote me a letter back. And you want to see, it's on red paper. I got one from Bill Bryson, and his reply was amazing. It just said, "Hi, Sarah, if you want to know how to be an author, my advice would be is to tell that author how wonderful his book is." Lots of love from Bill.
And this is going on the website. This is going on your website.
Yeah, it's called. It's going to be called Author Scrapbook, so you can have a little look at all the shenanigans I've been up to.
Love it.
Can't wait. Brilliant.
Absolutely brilliant. Well, there you
Fantastic.
go. Everyone needs to rock over to that. And so we just want to say a massive thank you for coming back on the show. And we also want to wish you all the biggest bestseller experiment luck in the world for the release of the treatment. And we will no doubt be catching up on its success over the next coming months.
Oh, my next author goal is to be the only person who's been on your show 3 times. Oh. So I'll see you this time next year.
Brilliant. Excellent stuff. Brilliant. Well, thank you again, everyone. And we hope you've been really inspired by today's show. And now we have been as well. And we look forward to joining you again, same time, same place next week. So it's a goodbye from Sarah. I think we need to break with tradition here. It's a goodbye from Mark 1.
And a goodbye from Mark 2. Oh, I nearly forgot who I was then. It's been a long day. Goodbye.
Goodbye.